What is the role of video games in the classroom? That's what we will discuss on this episode of Digital Doc Interviews. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Digital Doc Games, where we explore how games help us grow, connect, and heal. Today, I am joined by Hey Listen Games' very own Zack Hartzman. Zack is a New York high school teacher and founder of Hey Listen Games, where he creates curriculums for teaching with video games and engages in discussions about game-based learning. This episode's community question is, what is your favorite game that has taught you something about the real world? Respond with your answers in the comments below, and I'll make sure to respond. Unfortunately, the very beginning of this interview had some audio issues, but thankfully those all cleared up by the time we got to the real meat of the interview. So let's jump in here and learn all about Hey Listen Games and teaching with video games. So you're the founder of this website, this movement, Hey Listen Games, where you actually explore curriculums and how to teach with video games. We'll get into that, but could you tell me, I'm really curious, how did that wrap up? Because I love a good story of someone taking games and merging it with their passion or their day job. So for you, what did that look like?
Yeah, so going in during one of my graduate classes, we had one of the professors was around like methodologies and teaching, and he would always bring in like try to use movies, try to use comics, use graphic novels, use manga, use anime, like all the different things pop culture related that students are already like swimming in every single day.
Right.
And so I knew going in year one that I wanted to try all different. These are things that I do. I grew up reading comics. It still baffles me that like superheroes are now common and like the cool thing.
Right. That's right. Yeah, it wasn't that way before. Before you were a nerd. Now it's cool.
Yeah, and so when I started teaching, I would find ways to bring in film. I made a point to teach with a comic or at least one comic or graphic novel every single year, one film every year. And then in about my third years, and those lessons always went well. They were always super engaging. And part of it was because I was bringing my own passions into the classroom. And because when you're passionate about something, it's like contagious. Students see that you're really excited about it, so they get excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And gaming is the biggest aspect of my life outside of work. When I come home, I play games. I just did the PlayStation 2020 year in review.
Right.
And it was something like, I think it was like 537 hours. And that's just PlayStation.
Yeah.
That's not my Nintendo. That's not my PC game. That's just PlayStation.
Right.
That's a ton of time.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find ways to bring that into the classroom also.
That's awesome.
And when I thought like on my own experiences in elementary school, really, if teachers using games, it was Oregon Trail or Math Blast there, and I didn't want to do that because that turned me off from gaming in some ways. And so I wanted to bring entertainment games in, things that students were already playing at home, and just like repurpose it.
Yeah.
In a learning environment.
Right.
So I started off like with small web browser based games. One of the first ones I used was a game called The Republia Times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made by Lucas Pope. He developed more recently Return of the Obra Dinn.
Okay.
A game that got a puzzle game that got a whole bunch of awards. And in this game, you are in charge of a fictional country's newspaper, and you choose what headlines go on the front page and how big the headlines are. And your goal is to increase influence, right, and gain more support from the populace.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that, but then like halfway through the game, there's a rebellion who contacts you, and they want you to start posting headlines that paints the government in a bad light.
Wow.
And so it's all about propaganda and media. So I was teaching a unit on media literacy, so that was the game that I brought in to like go alongside it.
Yeah.
They loved it.
I would imagine so. Yeah. I mean, and that was going to be what I asked, next is, what do you see when you bring in a game like that? The value of I imagine bringing in these students and engaging them more into the discussions that you're having. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that the effect that you're seeing?
Yeah, so it's almost always more engaging than other lessons, and that could just be, it could be for a number of reasons. It could be the novelty of just having a video gaming class, and it's something new. But it's also Like I know half my students are gamers.
Right, right,
They might be playing sports games that don't do any never touch on political games at all, but it's a game and that's something that they're literate in,
right.
right? They know that world, so just bringing that in gets them hooked.
Well, I really like, something that you said, which is that you're not necessarily looking at the games that were designed to be educational tools. You're not necessarily looking
Exactly.
at your Oregon Trails, but you're taking these games, fine, and your website does such a good job of this. On heylistengames.org, you do such a great job of taking a game and exploring then, what is the value of this, what is the curriculum around this game. And that's something that I find to be true on Digital Doc games as well, is that, we look at games that are designed, maybe for a certain health purpose. Maybe it's a digital therapeutic like Achille, or a game to train a doctor like Level X. But we also spend a lot of time I mean, I know both of us were recently playing Celeste, because there's so much to learn from a game about Celeste from the health side of things, and certainly about the learning side of things also. So I really like that idea of treating games. You don't have to, um, you don't have to remake the wheel, right? Like it's already
Right.
there for you. There's value in these things.
Yeah, definitely. Because it has to do with like intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, where like the like there is value in educational games. It's why it's a big industry, but a lot of them tend to be extrinsically motivated, where like you're playing the game, you're playing the game, you're playing the game, and then the reward is like what you get at the end. It's
Right.
like, oh, now you know how to solve this problem, or now you know the translation to this word, or now you know this fact. Whereas with like standard entertainment based games, they're intrinsically motivated, where the reward is the actual gameplay. You're having fun throughout it. You're not trying to get something at the end,
That's right. That's right.
right? It's just the process.
So we'll come back a little bit more to some of the games that you use actually as an educator, but I want to talk about actually game based learning. Not necessarily, what can we learn? For instance, what game would be a good game for social studies or to learn about mental health, which we'll get into. But what do games teach us about the process of learning? I would love to hear your insight into that.
Sure. So it's like a bit of a story. So like the name of my website is Hey Listen Games,
Hmm.
and that's a callback to the Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, where you have your sidekick Navi who constantly yells "Hey, listen" at you throughout the game to get
Okay.
your attention.
Right.
And when I originally played that game, I was 8 years old,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't know. And this was infant internet. This was like GameFAQs was where you went if
Of
you needed
course.
help. And I didn't. That was a big game. It was bigger than any game I've ever played before, and I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to talk to people online to find help. And Navi yelling, "Hey, listen!" Like it's a meme now. It's a joke now. But
Yeah.
like every time Navi said, "Hey, listen," I was just like, "Oh yes, please tell me what I need to know.
You
Tell me where
listened
to
up,
go."
right?
And so it taught me to listen carefully. A
Mm,
game like that also 100% text. So like I was reading a ton in that game, right, as an 8 year old. Because
right,
I know like
right.
my parents did force me to read like 50 pages of a book every single day, but I hated that.
Yeah.
Reading in a game, didn't mind it all. Never minded it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and beyond that, I also played it with my brother, who's 2 years older than me. And that game taught us to collaborate.
Right.
I mean, we're classic runners, fighting constantly all the time. But to get through that game, and we did beat it, we had to collaborate, we had to work together. And then beyond just the two of us, we each had to go to school the next day and talk to the other kids in the cafeteria about where they were going, what to do, what items do you have. So it's an entire social experience beyond, and it was a single player adventure game,
Right. Right.
right? So it taught me how to collaborate, it taught me how to communicate um, with a brother who I was always fighting with and
Yeah.
people at school.
Yeah. Man, wow. I mean, you just hit on so many topics. That's like a synopsis for everything that I want to explore on this channel. I mean, you talk about
Yeah,
the connection, the collaboration, and I think it's a really interesting fact, something I haven't thought about before. Reading, yeah. I mean, you're probably flipping through, at least a couple of 10 pages here and there, when you're reading your typical, game, text game, whatever it is. where you actually have to read the dialogue. That's really interesting. So, one thing I wanted to bring up, there's a TED Talk that I love, and I bet you're familiar with it. It's by Mark Rober. It's called The Super Mario Effect, Tricking Your Brain into Learning More. You know about this TED
I
Talk?
think I've heard of it. Yeah.
So it's really great, and it's I guess Mark, the speaker, highlights how this classic game, the original Mario, right, basically the most classic you can probably get as far as a game icon. How you give the game to someone who's never played, and I actually tried this with a couple of my nephews. This is the first game I start them on, and you don't tell them anything, and on their own they just kind of figure it out, right? They start moving the arrows, like, oh, if I press this arrow, Mario's going to go to the right side of the screen. Then they go in, and there's that first cliff, I guess, right? They have to jump over, but they don't know how to jump. So 9 times out of 10, someone's just going to fall right in. The next time they realize, okay, I need to jump over this. So you see, with a basic game like Mario, you see learning happening right in front of you. And the thing that I love about it is that video games, and tell me if you agree, put you in a place where failing is not only encouraged, but failing is fun. And for me, that is, and I know with Celeste, this is one of the reasons I love Celeste, and I bet you do too, but that is one of my favorite things about video games what they can teach us about education. Have you thought about that, the idea of failing being fun?
Yeah, I mean, ask any Bloodborne or Dark Souls player, and they're going to tell you like they revel in dying a million times. Um, but like in terms of Celeste, I think like for every lesson on my website, there's a little tagline, and what's the tagline for Celeste? I think it's like it's okay to fail sometimes.
Okay.
Like I literally say that.
Right.
And even yeah, it's like the game keeps track of how much you die. After every level, it has a skull with a counter for a tally of how many times you died in that level.
Right.
And that's the gameplay of it, and it's interwoven with the actual narrative of the game, where yes, you're going to struggle, but if you keep at it, you can move past it or you can overcome it. It's all about persistence. It's about having a growth mindset, and overcoming adversity. And when I use that game, I don't actually play the entire game with them because it's hard to find the actual time and
right.
to do that. But I do play through the first 2 levels with them, and they get that message. That it's like even when you finish the first level, a letter pops up that says, "Be proud of your death count."
That's right. That's right.
Right, and I love that so much.
Yeah. That's so awesome, right? And it is, I think also taken in games like you mentioned, like Dark Souls and Sekiro and Bloodborne and all of those. It's definitely interesting. I love Celeste. It's not the traditional type of game I like. I haven't, I played Jedi Fallen Order, but that's, I haven't like played a real Souls-like game. But I do like the concept a lot. Mm-hmm. One question I wanted to ask you is, do you think that model of failing being fun or even encouraged is something that could or should make its way into the traditional educational system?
I think so, yeah. I mean, right, a game is often made, right, so that you can fail in a safe environment. It's a safe place for you to play, learn, and then get better regardless of failure.
Right.
And school is often not a safe place for students to fail for a number of reasons. And there's a lot of issues with education, how education is currently set up in general. And part of it is the like super importance placed on grades in general, and just the pressure that puts on students.
Right.
Where like you fail one test and your GPA is like destroyed for the year.
Right.
Right. Depending on the school and on the teacher and on the admin. And that doesn't make failure a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make school a safe place for students to fail in and then try again.
Right.
For a lot of them, they're just expected to do well.
Right.
From the start, which isn't realistic.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I could speak in terms of medical education. This is a direction that medical educators and the system overall is slowly heading towards. You see certain steps. The first licensing exam, USMLE Step 1 for medical students, is now pass fail. It wasn't that way just a couple years ago when I took it, which is a huge difference. You see a lot of schools, and this already was the time, but happening a lot of places by the time I was in medical school, but are pass fail honors maybe systems rather than it used to be when my dad was in medical school. It was kind of cutthroat because everyone was being ranked against the other. You're always fighting the curve. So I'm happy to see that at least that level of higher education is slowly moving that way. But certainly there's a lot of room for improvement there.
And like a way that is changing is a lot of schools are starting to move towards mastery-based outcomes, which is it's not about assigning a number out of 100 to a student. It's like looking at where the student is at and their growth and where they need to be, right? So I'm not going to assess two students in my class exactly the same way. If a student needs to learn how to analyze, then I'm going to teach that student how to analyze, but another student might just need to learn how to identify like keywords in a paragraph. Right. So it's not, I can't just ranking those two students together isn't going to help anyone.
Right.
It's taking an outcome and assessing them at where they need to be. I actually just had a couple days ago, I posted on Twitter that you shouldn't dock points on an assignment handed in late.
I saw this, yeah.
And a lot of people agreed, which is wonderful because I absolutely hated when teachers did this to me.
Right.
And it's because if I handed it in an assignment late and I got everything right on it, they still took off 10 points or half credit or whatever it was. They didn't assess the content that was being asked of me, right? That's now assessing my ability to hand in something on time, and they're conflating those two things together.
That's right.
And that is still a common practice everywhere.
Right.
Like even there are teachers in my school who still have that ingrained in them where if you don't hand in an assignment, it's a 0.
Right.
How could you give them a 0 if you don't know what they're capable of?
Right. It's almost like it makes me think like we think back now to a teacher in the classroom, like when our parents were in school, it used to be common for them to get like a ruler on the hand or something. Like that would never happen. That would never fly in today's world. Like I hope that by the time my kids are growing up in high school at that point, we're at a point where that seems as foreign, Maybe it's not as gut punching, but I would love to get to that way. So I'd love to jump back, Zach, and talk about Hey Listen Games. Like I said, heylistengames.org, a lot of really interesting breakdowns of some different games, broken down into subjects, including English language arts, social studies, social emotional health, and science. If a teacher was listening to this, maybe they're even a medical educator, and they want to go to your website, what would you say would be the one game, you could only choose one, the one game that you would suggest them using as a teaching mechanism?
Gone Home.
That was such a quick answer. I was expecting to have to build in this is the ad break time.
It's Gone Home is the answer. When did it come out? 2012.
Okay, I didn't play it, so don't spoil it for me because I'm going to play it.
I won't spoil it.
Okay.
But it basically kickstarted the walking simulator genre. There are definitely some before it. So if you know the Stanley Parable.
No.
So it's first person, and you just walk around. Like the gameplay is just walking around a house and picking up objects, reading notes, listening to things, and that's it. There's no action. There's no fighting. It's literally just walking around, picking things up, and looking at things.
Mm-hmm. This is in Gone Home.
Yeah.
Right.
And it kind of popularized that genre. I see a lot of games come out in this way, and it is super accessible because that is the gameplay, right? You just need the challenge for students who haven't really played games is that one analog. If you're playing with a controller, one analog stick makes you move, and one analog stick controls the camera.
That's right.
Where you face.
Right. That's very hard for some people.
I see Spriggan says Stanley Parable is a masterclass in comedy. It is 100%. I also recommend that game for many reasons. I have a lesson for that game on my site.
There you go.
And Gone Home, the story in that game is remarkable. And you there. I'm doing my best not to spoil it. So
I
like,
see you. I see your gears turning. Like,
yeah,
what
yeah.
can you
So
say?
basically, you play as a character named Caitlin, returning from study abroad to a new home because your family had moved to a new house while you were gone. And it's the middle of the night. There's a thunderstorm, and no one's home. And there's a note on the front door from your younger sister Sam, saying that she's gone, and to not try and find her. Don't go looking through the house trying to find her. And basically, you obviously start going through the house trying to figure out where the hell everyone is, and you start finding journal entries of Sam's over the course of the time that you've been away, of her going to a new school, trying to make new friends, and this story of Sam is just amazing, and it
Wow.
connects with students in such a good way. And it's only about 2 to 2.5 hours long, so it's not going to be time consuming.
Right.
And this can be used as, because I'm not going to spoil the content, like it could be used in social studies, it could be used in ELA, and it can definitely be used for social emotional health because it's
Right.
dealing about issues that teenagers are dealing with.
Right. Right. Wow. Okay. I'm really excited that. So I know Gone Home is a favorite of friend of the show and Digital Doc interview alum Doc Brook. And we were actually just talking today on Twitter about maybe doing a co-stream somehow of my first playthrough through that. So I'm gonna get that
Mm-hmm.
going because now I gotta figure it out.
Yeah.
Great. That's a great recommendation. So as we start to wind down the interview, I want to invite the chat live, viewing live on Twitch. If you have any questions for Zack, feel free to shoot them in the chat. Friggin' Spriggan, love that name. Love that name. Also, recent follower of Digital Doc Games. Welcome to the care team. Thanks for being here. But I do have one more question for you, Zack. So I was recently on the Geekoscopy podcast,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I know you were as well. And Dr. Giannis Kistin, who hosts that show, asked me a question while I was on it, and I thought it was such a good question. And I asked his permission, but I said, I want to steal this question from you, and And so this is the Geekoscopy sponsored question of the show. Um, Zack, if you were tasked, and maybe he asked you this too, if you were tasked with directing the development of a video game, what kind of game would you make?
Probably a walking simulator
Okay.
in the vein of Gone Home. So my two favorite games to teach with are Gone Home and What Remains of Edith Finch,
Mm-hmm.
which is another walking simulator where, again, first person, you're walking through a house and just collecting things. So I don't necessarily think I would do it in a house.
Right.
Um, but I do think that genre is just a perfect fit for schools because it's just take this short story. You can add, and there's like different ways to do it. So the developer who made Gone Home also made a game called Tacoma.
Right.
It was their follow-up game, and the entire game is told like you board a space station and you're trying to figure out what happened there. Everyone's missing. It's kind of all destroyed. And the game is told through holograms of the people who were there because everything's recorded. So you're just replaying through holograms, but it's all out of order because you could follow this person around, then you rewind and follow a different person, right. So the whole game is told. There's just so many different unique ways to tell a story within the walking simulator genre. So I
Right.
definitely think I would stick with that.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great area. Friggin' Spriggan in the chat says Edith Finch is so perfect. Got to play Unfinished Swan too.
Yeah, I haven't
Both of
played
those,
Unfinished Swan
yeah.
myself yet, but I know it was Giant Sparrow's first game before they made Edith Finch.
Right.
And Edith Finch is just like a masterclass in storytelling.
I'm gonna have to get through these on the channel. I would say my favorite walking simulator is one that I actually reviewed on the channel and was lucky enough to speak to the developers who made the game. But the game Before I Forget, are you familiar with that game?
Oh yeah, I just made a lesson this past year for it.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
So Before I Forget, for anyone who doesn't know, and you can go check out that interview as well. A game where you play as a woman with early onset dementia and same kind of deal, walking around your house. And it's funny because when I was talking to my dad actually about this game, I think he said, and it's just a common reaction is like, well, why would anyone want to play this? You don't have a sword, you don't have a gun. Like, what's the fun in this? But I think it speaks really to the evolution of this medium of video games, that these are very popular and on the top of, Before I Forget, I saw in countless lists of game of the year. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, because the video games as a medium have like evolve beyond just play,
Right.
right? I just played Elegy for a Dead World, which is a game where you just write, right? It places you in a world
Yeah.
with like a gorgeous backdrop and music, and you just write like you're just supposed to be inspired by the environment that you're in, the world you're in, and just write a short story or a poem.
Cool.
And if you can't do it freeform, it actually will give you writing prompts, kind of like Mad Libs, to fill in the blanks, right? So the game is you're just writing.
Huh.
You're not playing.
That's interesting.
Technically.
Oh my God, you have like named such like a great list, like for anyone to go. I guess that's what you do, but to go play.
I mean, so that's the point, because when I originally started looking for materials to teach with video games, there's nothing out there
Right.
besides the educational gaming industry that has lesson plans for their own games that they make. But in terms of just entertainment games, if I wanted to find like other teacher activities for movies or for comics, those have been made. Teachers have created and shared those, but not for video games. So I just had to start making all my own from scratch, especially since my principal was like, okay, if you're going to do this, I need to see the standards. I need to see the outcomes that you're going to hit, all the formal stuff.
Right.
So I started making my own, and then in speaking with other teachers out there who needed a place to start, I made my website and just made all my curriculum and lesson plans and handouts and slides available for free, just to act as a starting point for people who want to teach with video games.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And absolutely, if you've made it this far in the interview and you haven't gone and checked out Zach's website already, I'll say it one more time. HeyListenGames.org. You got to check it out. It's really amazing. Zach, I thought of one more question I want to ask you before we end.
Sure.
One thing we haven't talked about in this interview yet is different delivery methods of video games. Virtual reality and augmented reality are becoming more popular now. The Quest 2 is selling well, getting into the hands of more people, making these technologies more accessible. Anything that jumps to mind? Anything that excites you about these platforms as potential learning platforms?
I'm definitely excited about the aspect of VR becoming more accessible, because right now it's just too big of a tech requirement and paywall. Because even like if I could convince my school to invest in VR, I'm getting one headset, maybe.
Right.
So, but in terms of, I guess I should also note, for like a lot of teachers always ask me the tech requirements just for video games in general.
Sure.
Usually, unless the game is free, I'm only getting one copy of the game and we play it together. Right? If the game is free and it's like a web browser or you can download it to a computer for free, then I'll put them in groups so that they can play in groups. But like for Gone Home, for instance, I just brought in my Nintendo Switch, put it up on the screen, and had one student be the player, and the rest of us were just watching and discussing the same way you would a film or a documentary.
Right.
But I would love for VR to become more accessible to, like, sure, maybe one student has the headset on and then it's projected also on the screen, but just to set that up is time consuming and a lot of money.
Right. Absolutely. But yeah, it's a lot of interesting things. I think the power of immersion, even video games have it, VR absolutely has it, to take you to faraway places, to teach you about new experiences, new perspectives. I think it's really exciting. Friggin Spriggan says, if it weren't centered around a bomb, Keep Talking and No One Explodes is an excellent game to build communication skills. That's a cool one. You know that game?
I've heard of it. I haven't played it, but I've definitely heard of it.
Yeah, that's a fun one. That's so one player has the VR headset on. It's on PSVR. I don't know if it's on other ones too. And then the other players either have a printed manual or it's on the TV. But they have to go, the VR player is describing the bomb that's wrapped around his torso, what color it is, what wires it is, how many batteries it have.
Yeah.
And based on his description, his or her description, the other players have to, go flip through this manual and be like, okay, 4 batteries, green wire, red wire, black wire, maybe it's this one, and like give them the instructions.
It sounds great.
It's a fun one. Cool. Maybe we'll see that pop up in one of your classrooms. Zach, this has been so much fun. I'm like pinching myself because I could literally keep this interview going for another hour. I have so many more questions I want to ask you, but maybe we'll just have to have you back because it's such a...
I'll definitely come back.
Awesome. Cool. He likes us. Awesome. Well, Zach, if people, we've mentioned a couple times, but if people, best place to follow you to learn about what you're doing, where can they go?
Sure. So easiest answer is probably on Twitter. I'm at HeyListenGames _.
Yes,
Don't
we
forget
have
the
it. We have it
underscore
right
at the end.
there.
Someone else has at HeyListenGames, even though this person has been inactive for like 8 years now. I can't.
Oh my
I
God.
even have a trademark in the name, and they won't let me get it.
Unbelievable.
You can also, on heylistengames.org, there's also a contact form. Like just that one of the tabs is contact, and there's the email heylistengamesinfo@gmail.com, or just fill in the contact form and it'll shoot me an email. And I check that every single day, so that's also an easy way. If you don't want to go on Twitter, I understand. Stay away from there. Shoot me an email. I'll respond pretty quickly.
Awesome. Well, there you go. Go follow Zach. If you're not following Digital Doc Games, make sure you do that, or subscribe on YouTube or whatever podcast, whatever mechanism, thumbs up, fire emojis, I don't know, whatever it is, press it. We love having you here. We love talking about this stuff. I'm Digital Doc. That's Zach. Thanks for joining, everyone, and game on. We'll see you next time.